Hi, good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining. We have Thomas Kloepfer here, who's based in Mukaishima, near Onomichi in Hiroshima, running a no-till natural organic farm. Thanks so much for joining, Thomas.
Thanks for having me. Yeah.
Now, I've had the pleasure of coming out and visiting your farm, and I was looking at the video today, researching this talk, and that was 2019. You must have had some changes since then.
Yeah. I think the farm slowly seems to be developing each year. We've put in a pack shed and kind of expanded the space in the last year or so. So yeah,
Nice.
it's gone undergone some changes. Yeah.
For people that don't know, can you explain why you call it Pitchfork Farms?
I think we're Pitchfork Farms for several reasons, but one of the main reasons is that we use a pitchfork actually to till or to not till the ground. Each of our beds are designed in a way where we're just going to, yeah, put the pitchfork in the ground, add a little bit of air, and it's kind of oftentimes the pitchfork has a symbol of a revolution. Often when you're angry at the government, you raise your pitchforks and torches, and we're not to that extreme, but in terms of kind of a revolution in the way of farming, thinking about not tilling the ground is something that's maybe necessary to discuss, and that's what our symbol kind of represents on the farm, and also how we prepare the soil. So those are the two main kind of reasons why we have the pitchfork.
Can you outline your concept for the farm you have on your website? Talk about clothing, food, and shelter.
Yeah. So some of the ideas from there, the Japanese idea of Isshoku-Jiyu are really important. And when we think about the sustainability of our farm and the sustainable living model that we're trying to approach, on the food side, that's where the farm comes in. Textile side, we raise sheep. We've grown cotton in the past, and I work alongside with my wife at Tachibana Kaori-san, or Nisato Kaori at Tachibana Textile, and she does a lot of clothing, either design and making. So that's a big aspect. And in terms of building, we do a lot of building. The room I'm in right now is an old citrus storage shed that uses clay, uh, straw, and sand as the walls. And a lot of the materials are sourced locally. And we also try to recycle or upcycle a lot of abandoned or unused wood and doors, windows that come off old Japanese buildings in the housing around us. And we've brought in a lot of carpenters to come in, and maybe even in the future would like to offer some building or natural building workshops too, as a part of the Isshoku-Jiyu or clothing food shelter model.
That's great. And can you talk a little bit about the reason you decided to do no-till and natural farming? A
Mm,
lot of people might argue it's such a big hurdle not to use pesticides or not to use commercial fertilizers. What
mhm.
kind of got you started in the passion to do it that way?
Around the same time I was interested in starting gardening or starting farming, a lot of my um, initial interest in agriculture really came from a course in sustainable agriculture at Appalachian State University, where we read uh, One Straw Revolution, or Wara Ippon no Kakume, by Masanobu Fukuoka. He talked about no-till farming in his book, and that was the big shift in my mind. But I didn't think it was really possible. I mean, he was kind of this philosopher farmer, and maybe some of the ways in which he was farming don't always pan out, especially if you want to try and do it on a commercial scale. So I did use a rototiller in the first several years. I thought, wow, this is so easy, just to till up everything and get planting right away and get the soil nice and soft. But the more I read about it, and also the more examples I saw of people no-till farming, not only in Japan but also in the States, they talk about keeping the soil alive, not using by not tilling, you can actually improve the organic matter in the soil. You can build up your soil this way. You can add air. You can improve your micro bacterial activity. You can also work to protect some of the species like the earthworms that are in the soil by not tilling it. So there's several reasons that brought me to no-till, but certainly the one straw revolution, plus these successful examples in the States that we're seeing right now. Those are two big examples that brought me to this no-till method. Yeah.
That's great. And when I visited in 2019, you said you were trying to do year-round crops, and you had about 40 to 50 crops each year. Has it been
Mm.
about the same?
Yeah, I think, and I think so. I think we're still around that. We sell probably 40 varieties of uh, herbs and uh, fruits and vegetables in at the market, and it could be maybe closer to 60 at this point. And then we're in the process of expanding our orchard. So in the future, we hope to have more citrus production, more fig production. So that would just add to the diversity that's on the farm, and that becomes a really important aspect of the farm. We don't just grow one crop or two crops. We really try to have multiple things going on, a real biodiverse approach to agriculture.
And you were actually talking about the benefit of leaving weeds. Can you
Mm.
talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, so there are certain weeds that you really don't necessarily have to take out of the soil or pull out of the soil. And sometimes it's better to keep the soil covered. And like now in wintertime, you'll see a lot of soil, rice fields, for example, are bare, and so when you have that, soil erosion, soil runoff losses exist in that. So we try to keep the soil covered. We're selective in our weeds. So it's not that I like having certain varieties of weeds. There's some weeds that are really difficult to get rid of. They tend to stick to your clothes and stick to your pants when you're out working in the field. So there's certain weeds that I don't necessarily want in the field. But things like clover and certain types of legume species, we'll keep those in the field, and then we'll actually choose our weeds. You can now buy a lot of grasses and perennial grass seeds, and we need those on the field to cover up the field in the winter time, and also to get a good carbon-rich plant material that will also feed to our animals at some point, either in the spring and the summer. So we're pretty selective about which weeds we keep in the ground, and we're not too picky about it. Yeah.
You were also talking in when I visited about crop diversity, how
Mm.
important it is. Can you talk about that a little bit?
So we're often rotating crops. We'll have, right now in the field we'll have, and this is something that I've been experimenting with as well, is we did a lot of seed saving this past year, and in spaces where I didn't exactly have a full-on plan of, okay, well, if we plant this here, but what we can do with all these crop seeds that we've saved is we can actually broadcast and scatter them about. So in one particular field, we have uh, carrots, kale, daikon, beets, um, Swiss chard, all growing together. And the radishes are going to go through and till up the soil. So they're going to go down deep and break up the soil for us since we're not tilling. And the kale is going to actually grow in between those radishes, those daikon radishes that are now popping up. And so you get this kind of almost forest-like diversity. And there are less weeds because there's food growing. The food is the weeds, or the weeds are the food, depending on how you look at it. And then when those crops come up, they'll flower this coming March and April, and then they'll bring this bouquet of wildflowers for other insects to come in and feed off of too. And then those tops can then be cut and fed to our sheep, or fed to our chickens, etc. So we're trying to establish these kind of experimental um, patches of land that typically where you'd want to work hard and till it up, and you can really reduce your effort and your work by establishing this kind of biodiversity in your field. So that's one of the big points there we try to make.
Now, you mentioned using the animals as workers on your farm. Can you tell us what kind of animals and how you utilize them?
So we have several chickens on the farm right now. Um, three varieties of chickens, I think. We also have three sheep, three varieties. We have one goat right now, who's kind of our mascot. She's not really a milking goat. And then we have two ducks on the farm as well right now. So the ducks are new. They're for egg laying purposes, but they tend to eat a lot of bugs on the farm. They eat slugs. They eat a lot of the roly-polies, which can sometimes damage the new growing sprouting plants. So we're using them for bug control and also for fertilizer as well. The sheep and the chickens as well as the ducks, they provide a lot of fertilizer for our farm, and so we're able to. And I guess we have a dog too, and the dog maybe keeps the boar away. Not so much. He's not as much as of a guard dog as we wish, but yeah, this is the diversity that we have on the farm
And
as well.
when I talked to some other farmers who also had animals, for example, John Speary,
Mm-hmm.
who's near Lake Biwa in Shiga, he had a lot of trouble with predators,
Okay,
foxes or things coming and eating his chickens. And
right.
have you had any issues like that?
Yeah, we had the the Japanese name. I'm not quite sure, but it's the Japanese raccoon dog. This Anaguma Kaori, is it Anaguma? Tanuki. Sorry, Tanuki. Yeah, Tanuki has been a problem for the chickens. So we were using a chicken tractor, which is a movable box that we would rotate around the fields. We were using that up in the top part of the farm with our chickens, but we've actually at this point brought all the chickens back to the main coop where they lay eggs, and that seems to be a better area for them. The tanuki can't get in there, but certainly we have tanuki on the farm, and also some weasels and snakes too. I think there was one time my wife Kaori went in to get eggs, and on the other end of the egg was a rat snake. So yeah, she was screaming at that point to come and yeah,
Well,
come in.
rat snake's not the dangerous kind,
Yeah,
but it's
Mama.
still pretty scary.
Yeah, it's still pretty scary. Yeah, snakes tend to creep a lot of people out or freak a lot of people out. So yeah, she was screaming. Um, yeah. So.
Boar, talking about the
Well,
wild boar. When
every.
I visited, you talked about the problems for farmers with boars.
Mhm.
They destroy the topsoil,
Mm,
they eat your vegetables. And there's been a big problem with boar all over Japan, right?
right. In Mukaishima in particular, they never really were here. They don't have any natural predators at all. So yeah, the wild boar, they're really I mean, they really till up a lot of the soil. They damage a lot of the side, like especially when you have really fragile hill soil like we have here in Mukaishima. Um, so yeah, they can be a big problem. I think this year they got in earlier on in the season in June, and I thought our sweet potato would have been wiped out. But it rained a lot in early June and then through July, so we were able to actually still reestablish that crop. But they are a really big problem. And we've had to set up electric fencing around the perimeter of the farm, as well as we have the metal wire fencing as well. So these are two things that we've got to keep the boar out. But they certainly are. I mean, it's millions of dollars in damage on agricultural crops in Japan every year. So it can be a huge issue.
Yeah.
Not as much as some of the other crops, I think. I know our friend Chuck over in Kyoto and Shiga he deals with monkeys, and uh, yeah, that makes me nervous.
Yeah. When I visited Chuck, he was talking about the monkeys, and they're so clever
yeah,
that even an electric fence might not keep them out.
yeah, they can just
But
climb over. So
I guess
uh,
every farmer has your area animals that might need to manage, right?
yeah, yeah, yeah. So, but for the
Back to
yeah,
sheep a little bit though. You were also utilizing the wool with the textile place. Is
yeah,
that right?
yeah. So Kaori's company, one of the things that she did study, and she went to an art university in Tokyo, and she's really studied about felt production. So that's what we're hoping to do for felt. processing will typically will shear the sheep in April or May. Then you'll wash it, and then you'll use hot water and soap, and actually be able to make other products using either felted, or we have uh, we have a tool at the textile company to make thread, so we can do that as well. So we're looking at some of those options. Right now we have a lot of just the raw wool material, and we're always just discussing like how we're going to use it and what we're going to use it for. But that's something that in the future we hope to bring into. Um, yeah.
Yeah, it's great that to utilize all the parts of the animal while they're alive. They're helping with making compost and eating your weeds. I
Right.
think when I visited, your goats were eating all the weeds around the textile business, and
Right.
you were
Yeah. Yeah.
lending them out to people.
Yeah, yeah, neighbors as well. I mean, when, things grow really, really well in Japan, especially in the after the rainy season and before and leading up to the rainy season in spring. So having animals to kind of keep everything, in check has really helped. We've established a perimeter around the farm that our sheep will graze in, and just having that perimeter weed free or weed seed free really has helped control our weed population within the farm itself, I think. So that's been really great. Yeah.
That's great. One of the things I was really interested in reviewing the video again is about seeds. Can you
Yeah,
tell us about cultivating seeds and a bit of the seed politics and import versus local seeds?
right. So I hadn't really done a whole lot of seed saving until really I think it would be 2 or 3 years ago when I really started doing it. We've been able to borrow a few tools to help us, like a thresher and a winnow, which is it's an older tool that we use to actually push air through the seed. So if you can have some of these tools, it really helps in the process. But with some of the seeds we've saved, and especially in this past year, we've saved several bean seeds, kale, arugula, um, our wheat and our rye seeds are saved every year. And a lot of the seeds can actually not be saved necessarily, but will just drop and fall again once the soil is in good condition. We actually have places where kale or daikon radishes will actually just grow up naturally. I didn't plant them. I didn't do anything. They just grow. And so that's one really important aspect. But once I saw how easy it was for them to resprout and germinate, I started getting more and more interested in saving those seeds. And then the plants and the again going back to this idea of biodiversity, things that are locally established here that have several generations of growing on our farm really thrive. They don't require insect netting. They don't require any particular upkeep. I mean, other than harvesting, and that's been really great. And I find that these days the seeds that are purchased, although I am still purchasing seeds, that's one of the big things we're doing in the winter time is purchasing and looking at the seed catalogs, which is common amongst most farmers and gardeners in the winter time, sitting around the fire and looking at the seed catalogs. Um, we are saving a lot of seeds, and they just seem to thrive. In Japan, they have somewhat changed the seed laws about what can be saved and what can't be saved. A lot of this has to do with patenting of seeds. So for example, if I have a kale variety that's really unique and interesting in color and flavor, maybe I could patent that seed. But then it raises this question of, well, what are seeds and aren't they a commons? Don't seeds belong to everybody as a human population? Don't and maybe even from the environmental perspective or nature perspective, can we really patent nature? Because ultimately we don't own the original genetics for these varieties. So we have to start questioning and asking ourselves what's going to be important and what's going to be important for the future. As of now, saving these seeds and keeping these seeds isn't there's nothing technically illegal about it. And you could argue also that once these seeds are grown here and reseed themselves, like for example a carrot variety, if I let it go to flower and it falls on my property, I didn't plant it. am I infringing on somebody's right to that carrot? It becomes really tricky. And I've had this happen in the last year or so. Um, Carrots went to flower and they fell outside of my property. And I maybe had some issues with neighbors saying, well, your vegetables are coming into outside of your property. And I didn't plant the carrot there. It fell into the space. So whose responsibility is these plants? And is that, you know, it's the carrot's job to survive and thrive there.
That's
I
really
don't know.
interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, the whole
You know,
concept of food equity and
hmm,
isn't it a human right to be able to grow food and stuff and
right.
to cultivate your own seeds is really interesting. We have a comment from Chuck
Hmm.
Kaiser in Shiga, who I visited on his farm as well. This is so great. Sorry to hear about the Tanuki. I want to comment live, but don't know how. Great job, Joy and Thomas. Well, you're doing it. Chuck, you are commenting live, so keep commenting or asking questions if you have. Feel free. One other thing you mentioned about seeds was a seed library idea, which I thought was really cool.
Right. Yeah, we haven't officially established the seed library. It's at this point, it's really just been about building up stock of certain seeds. But I think from community to community, so in our village of 300 households, maybe this should be something we should be talking at the community level first. Um, but I know that some farmers in the Hiroshima area, there's one farmer in particular, Okada-san. He's been working with one of the seed banks that we have locally in Hiroshima. I think it's in Higashi Hiroshima, the seed bank. They're most likely losing some of their funding, and these kind of seed libraries that have had old heirloom varieties of seeds, like really unique pumpkins or really unique um, cucumbers, eggplants, etc. These kind of places need maybe more support and more interest from local farmers, especially unique varieties. I think as F1 varieties or as some of these varieties come, that we lose some of the genetic diversity that might be important for future generations, particularly tomatoes or corn, for example. Not so much here in Japan, but in certain in other countries and countries in Africa, they deal with this a lot. Is that they're often, they might be provoked into growing a higher yielding corn per se, and but actually the corn that they prefer is one that they've been growing for generations because of the flavor. They just prefer the flavor. So that speaks to, yeah, issues of like you've said, equity and what food can grow and what food can't grow, and the economics of food production too. They often uh, outweigh the cultural value of some of these varieties too. So we have to, I think we question these things, and we have to continue to question um, the variety and diversity in and around our farms, because at some point we're going to lose species. So I mean, and that's inevitable. I think, especially under the current models of food production, we continue to lose more and more species of foods. So maybe we lose other things along with those lines.
That's great. Can you talk a little bit about the relationship with customers? You talked in the video about how important regular customers are to your
Hmm.
business as a farmer and having that B2B relationship as well as B2C. It takes a lot of time, but
Hmm.
can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, it's certainly not always easy, especially the maybe the B2C. And I think here in Japan, establishing that, um, whether it's, some of our customers are not from Japan, and some of our customers are Japanese, and maybe it's more we have more Japanese customers, but that you know knowing knowing and creating a relationship with those customers becomes so valuable and so important, and it becomes difficult to establish too, especially to difficult to establish over a long period, because uh, as a farmer and as an organic farmer, I've only been really farming and growing like this for several years. Don't have as much of experience, and we're not, you know, we're by no means perfect, and it's really hard to replicate or emulate what you see in the grocery stores too. And we just sometimes we can't, and sometimes we are unable to provide the same size or the same, quality or value or even price point too. So if our customers who do work with us and who are willing to stick with us through these, several few years, then we create that relationship and that value chain that, we'll establish amongst each other. Because we're not only providing vegetables, but we're providing, we also provide ways of how to use certain crops, and also the importance of eating in season, why these crops grow the way they grow and during this time of the year. And also the differences in change in the season will also impact the crops too. Like a carrot grown in summer versus a carrot grown in winter, or kale grown in the summer versus winter, they often taste different, even though they're from the same soil and the same plant, the same variety of seed. Things will change, and that's really that offers up a new discussion of our food and what we're doing on the farm, and trying to create. I think through the current platforms with Facebook or Instagram, we're able to create a story and connect with the customer more and more, and then hopefully in this time, where maybe traditional outings are less likely, bringing people out to the farm and getting people out here. We've hosted several events, open air, events where people have come out to the farm, even in this past year, with under the current COVID-19 situation. We've hosted these events, and that's been really great to bring people out here, because people they want to be outside. They want to know where their food comes from. Most of our customers do, and that's why they continue to come back to us.
Plus, you're in such a beautiful location, which is actually on the blue line. You're right off of the blue line for
Right,
cycling, aren't you? Where
right,
people do the Shimanami cycling.
right. Yeah, we are. We're just, it's about ten minutes to the bridge from Mukaishima to Enoshima. Um, So yeah, we're close, and we're close to Onomichi too. We hope that in the future too, we can offer, more of those experiences. We're in talks right now with people out on Yuge as well, to offer some of these kind of farm tours and farm experiential learning and training tours. That I think that will add even more value, because it's not just about, hey, buy our vegetables. It's okay, hey, buy our vegetables, but what about your garden? What about your home? Are you growing anything? Like, how can we, how can we exchange seeds? How can we exchange plants with you? And try to teach people up from that, because food self some sort of food self-sufficiency and knowing where your food comes from doesn't just come from knowing and buying it from the farmer, but actually knowing and growing it yourself. You can understand maybe the difficulties that some farmers may face, especially doing it, without herbicides, without pesticides, without chemical fertilizers. I think most people like to grow their food in that way. Not everybody can, and I understand that, but that education side is a really important part of what we're doing here too.
Yeah, definitely. Chuck says, have you ever thought of starting a CSA take system? So a monthly subscription for the customers?
Yeah, we're looking at that right now. It's something we've thrown around, partly because um, I'm looking at, well, what if we just did harvesting on Wednesdays and Saturdays, for example? That this is what we tried to do and establish previously, because my delivery days were often on Thursday last year, and so yeah, we want to look at that. I wonder, in Japan particularly, I wonder how many people would be interested in, and we don't really know. We haven't tracked that, and what would be the price point for an order like that. But establishing those customers, whether it's 10 to 20 families per month or per week, um, would be, would be maybe an ideal situation, because that way we would know exactly how much to harvest and how much to sow and how much to um, and exactly where it would be going every single time. Oftentimes, if you go to a market or if you go to an event and you do have to bring stuff home, you kind of you wonder, oh, well, maybe I shouldn't have done all that. But if you actually know your customer base and you know exactly how much you're going to harvest and sell, that can be a really great assurance for farmers. So it's something we really have considered. But again, we're still thinking of the numbers. But right now, as it stands, we have several regular customers, either monthly or weekly. Uh, so we're working into that. And then getting customers to, I guess, retention becomes a big issue there, and offering those additional services, like I mentioned, this education or farm workshops, or maybe I'd really like to have those customers in particular come out for a farm party, a farm event that would be just for them. I'd like to do that, and that establishes a deeper relationship with our customers too. So we're thinking of that. Thanks.
That's great. There's also I'm showing now your market pictures. You've got some things in jars. Have you found that having things which don't go off so quickly, such as fresh salads, having that diversity of product has been helping?
Yeah, it's a great thing to have at the market. We have a fig farm close by that we're not the owners of, but we're kind of managing it right now. We work with the owner of the farm. It was an older couple who passed away. Both the husband and wife passed away this past year, and they had no one to take care of it. So we watched, for the first month or so, we watched figs drop all over the ground, and it's sad to see, but we're going to start seeing more and more of that in Japan. So if we can bring in new farmers or new entrepreneurs, young people potentially, to come into these abandoned lots and make something out of it, especially figs, because they do not keep, you've got about 2 days or so before they are just turned to mush. So making jams was something we really like to do. Having the right equipment and scaling that up, that maybe becomes a challenge for farmers. But right now, as it stands, Japan has pretty lenient laws that regulate the making of these farm products like pickles and jams. That could change too. So that might be a challenge, but it certainly has helped now and in the past when we had like salsas, tomato sauces, juices and jams. These are all things that we do like to make. Yeah.
When I visited, you were talking about expanding your fruit trees up into the hills. I talked to ume specialist the other day from Wakayama, and he's talking about ume trees and how farmers would just put nets under the trees, and when they fell off, they would be gathered kind of naturally. And I thought, what a perfect crop,
Right. Yeah. When you guys were talking about that, I was listening to the session, and yeah, I saw some really. I get these random YouTube videos from farming, and I've seen some machines now that they'll it'll come up to the tree that you're trying to harvest and wrap plastic around and literally shake all the fruit off the tree. Like they have these large scale machines for that as well. Because I had thought about that. There's got to be a better way, than going up and harvest and just let them fall naturally, and that would be great. But right now, yeah, as we're trying, one of the things we're doing in the winter time is looking at trees to grow. I've been listening to a lot of different videos on either YouTube or, and I just got an order list for citrus trees. So we planted 20 or so citrus trees last year. We're looking at maybe 40 or 50 more this year. Because we have the sheep, we've established a larger, it's probably the double the size of my farm right now. We've established that space and fenced it all in, and the sheep are able to go through there and eat a lot of the fallen leaves. And we're going to slowly establish into that, because the land that we did purchase when we first purchased the farm originally was all citrus orchard, and in the back the back end of the farm up on the hillside, where bamboo has now established itself, that was all citrus as well. So 2-3 years down the road, when we get rid of a lot of that bamboo and work to um, you know work to get the soil back in shape and kind of push out the Inushishi that have the wild boar that have established themselves there. Yeah, citrus is something that it makes sense because it's something that's been growing in this area for hundreds of years. So we want to establish that. Yeah.
You were talking also in the visit about even citrus diversity, that it doesn't really make sense to have all one kind of lemon or one kind of any monocrop.
Right. Yeah, I think especially as you play around with, I think as you play around with these varieties, I mean, this is our third year going into our fourth year of living on the farm. To say that we know in this variety of Mekong is going to work, I can't say that off my own experience. And we're seeing things, climate is changing. We need things that, can do really well and can establish themselves. Um, and because we're not using, any particular sprays on the farm, uh, things that can grow without that would be a big help. But knowing those varieties and actually watching, that's why we're looking at in this order list I have now. We've got 7 or 8 different varieties of citrus on that list, and then the plants we planted last year. It's Decopon, Yuzu, Wase Mekong, and Mekong. So different varieties of citrus, and then lemons as well as limes. We get to see, and that opens up the diversity in our market too. And also it opens up the diversity in our workload. We don't want to all be, harvesting one thing at one time necessarily. The figs is another great example. Figs can be harvested in September and October. And then you get into the citrus season, which is, starting November, December, even into January. So having that diversity really adds to diversity in your income and a diversity in your tasks on the farm, which is really crucial, I think, right now for small farms.
We have a question from Chuck Kaiser, which I think is a very common question for anybody taking over an Akia house as well. How easy is it to remove a bamboo grove?
Yeah, I don't think it is very easy at all. It's going to take a while. There's a few published reports on it from here that were published locally in Japan about what that would take, but it's going to take years. But then how you go about doing it, I think is going to take some really unique ways. So right now it's cutting the bamboo back, feeding it to the sheep. I was up this morning cutting some bamboo, slowly feeding it to the sheep, maybe bringing in some implements up there, maybe raising pigs in the bamboo forest and let them till up the bamboo forest for you. This could be a way to add the animal and the animal diversity. Let the pigs be pigs. Bring in the sheep. Let the sheep eat the leaves, eat the bamboo trees as well. They won't eat the bark. Or maybe we bring in pandas and we start a petting zoo. I don't know. But
Maybe like you joined the workshop the other day when we were making Mexican food, and you said maybe bamboo leaf might work for steaming tamales. That's a good idea.
Yeah. So that was one thing that I thought, because tamales, the corn husks, that I looked on to purchase, and they're a little expensive. Not, I mean, it's not ridiculous, but when you add the shipping cost, I was thinking what would be closer to home, what would offer the same idea, because we were throwing some different ideas around about how to steam you just need to steam the corn flour itself, or the masa harina. Yeah, masa harina. You just need to steam that. So as long as you have something, and ideally a natural, material to steam it in would be the best thing. And this bamboo leaf seems to suit that. That's what they use for the one of the Chinese dishes that's sort of it's kind of like onigiri, but it's kind of like a steamed, like creamy rice dish with meat in the center. That that uses bamboo leaves. So yeah,
And then sometimes you'll see mochi, which is
right,
wrapped in a tea leaf or some kind of leaf, right? Sakura
right.
leaf, maybe?
Yeah, they have that. Yeah, the sakura leaf as well as the maybe persimmon leaf. I think they use that as well. So yeah, I think there's like a lot of things that we could use locally to replace some of these things, especially if we want to eat some more traditional dishes from our home that we can't exactly get here. Um,
Definitely. Rodrigo has joined from Facebook. Thanks, Rodrigo. He says, "Do you have some orange trees in your garden or farm?"
yeah, we have well right now we're growing limes and yeah some types of oranges, not the true navel orange, but it's more of the Japanese varieties, the early harvesting citrus. And we do have one particular citrus that's kind of like a navel, but it's not as big as a navel orange. Yeah.
Dan H has joined from YouTube. Thanks for joining, Dan. He says, "How does no-till affect farming yield?"
Oh, it's for us because of our so for our crops that we're mostly growing for market, well, that's beets, radishes, kale, baby kale, mizuna. I would say it doesn't really affect because those kind of crops often don't need to be necessarily the farm doesn't need to be tilled, and even beets. This is one that what we did to establish the beets early on is we placed a sheet or a tarp out on the bed. We prepped the soil. We forked the soil, which that's our bed prep. We added a layer of compost, and we directly seeded the beets into that. Because we established the bed with a large sheet, we killed off the first flush of weeds, and then the beets got established. And this year, we had beets that would be, you know, uh, either tennis ball size or softball size beets. And beets need, they have, it's about a meter and a half of root growth. So they were fine. Our carrots, I'm getting carrots that are 3 or 4. We do get small carrots occasionally, but this year, because of our soil has improved and it's soft and fluffy in some ways because we're not tilling it, we're not adding a tractor, we're not compacting the soil, we're adding the carrots are really the carrots and the beets both being root crops are really easily able to establish themselves and grow to full size and maturity. So it hasn't affected us. And it also, because of our style of farming, I would say our workload is decreased because we're not tilling. I'm not out there bringing out a tractor or a rototiller. We're small scale in size, so it's not necessarily a problem for us to not till. One of the reasons for tillage is to maybe to cultivate the weeds and to get rid of your weeds. But there's this new, not new necessarily, this is thought that maybe if I mulch or if I add a layer of compost or straw, the tilling is not necessarily because tilling and digging adds more weeds potentially. It's kind of a yeah. This is something we're trying to do.
I'm showing on screen right now your pictures of your soybean.
Hmm.
Soybean in the field and then drying in your greenhouse. How
Right.
is it growing? It's such an essential crop in Japan.
It is, yeah. We grow this one particular variety of soybean. It's black and green, and we're doing it in this no-till fashion. I would say our soybeans don't get as big as some of the other places I've seen because of the lack of water we have in August. We have no rain in August and even in early September when the plant's flowering. So if we could flush that with water in late July and August, I think we could get a better yield. But we've been saving this one particular variety of soybean every year. And what we'll do is we'll plant it in July. We harvested it in October, and I'll come through with some scissors or shears and actually cut at the base, bring that down into the field. Most farmers would actually leave it into the field and let it dry, and then they'd harvest around this time of the year because it is a bit drier. It hasn't rained until yesterday. It hadn't rained for about a month and a half. So you would harvest once it's really dry, but we can actually, because we're not that big of scale, we'll bring it back into the greenhouse and let it dry, and then we'll establish the subsequent crop, our winter cover, which is either canola or wheat on again on a very small scale, but we'll have something in the field during that time. So yeah, our soybeans, and we're gonna take that soybean and we make our house miso, We don't sell soybeans, but we use it as a nitrogen fixer, and we also get the dried material. We feed that to the sheep, so we're using all parts of the plant in that case, and then that whatever the sheep don't eat end up in a large pile in their pen, which then ends up in our compost just next to the sheep pen. So that's really full cycle. And yeah, I just got done harvesting all the soybeans, several maybe 5 to 6 pounds, which is all we need for our miso for the year. And we'll keep that for 5-10 years. And it's something part of the kind of homestead farmstead model that we're doing here. So
that's great. If more people just ate beans and rice around the world, we'd have a lot less problems with climate change, right?
Right. I think beans are really the way. I was really impressed with the talk on Monday, because they were growing their own beans, and they were saying, yeah, it's kind of hard work, and it is to save those bean crops. But I was really interested in, hopefully I can touch base with them too and maybe get a few varieties of beans from them to try here in Mukaishima, because yeah, beans they're they are a really important crop, nitrogen fixing and just as a protein source. So
and so tasty in the
right,
refried bean
right,
recipe that they showed us.
right.
Yeah. Chuck says, is the canola and wheat a cover crop? Green manure? How do you put that back into the soil without a tiller?
We're not gonna till it back in. I'm gonna harvest the crop. We harvested uh, several pounds or a few kgs of canola seed last year that we could potentially use and press in the future. Um, the wheat we're going to harvest and thresh again, because we'll save a few pounds of seed. Right now our farm isn't that big, and it's not very flat, so we're not going to reestablish it. We just use it, like we'll cut the base, and that root matter in the soil that'll break down and actually be a part. We're also going to do this year. I did a big patch of rye, and this is something that I learned from the No-Till Growers podcast. There's a farmer in Kentucky. She was on their podcast with Farmer Jesse. He's the host of the podcast, and he was saying that this woman, she'll plant and seed rye, and then she'll take a big pallet and actually run it over across the top of the rye just before it's at the seed stage. And by doing so, you actually crush and kill the rye back by leaving it in the field, and then you can actually open up a chunk, or open up where the rye is now fallen and dead. You can open up holes, dig out a little bit, and then put your transplants in there. So we're going to try that this year. So that's a way of not necessarily reincorporating the rye, or reincorporating the grain or the canola back into the soil. This is something to try with this no-till method, since we're not using a tractor or a rototiller. But if you had like a flail mower, or if you had a good, I guess you could use the weed whacker in Japan. That could work to maybe cut it and then use that as a straw material in another place. But to actually reincorporate it, like what we've typically seen in no-till systems, or in cover cropping systems rather, yeah, I think this is something we don't do, or we can't do. But it'll incorporate itself over time once it's cut. You place that on the soil, and it'll go away pretty quickly.
That's great. And
Especially,
it's great hearing how you're still learning and you're
oh,
still trying out new concepts and ideas.
well, I think this the podcast I mentioned with Farmer Jesse, the No Till Growers podcast. He has YouTube, and he has podcasts available it seems like every week, every 2 weeks now. He has different people on, and I'm learning a lot of new processes there, and that's been really influential in kind of keeping this thing going, especially the no-till. Because there's been times where I want to get the rototiller out. I think it was just past year where I lent my rototiller to a friend, and it wouldn't start for him, and so it didn't work. And when he returned it to me, I didn't. This was in April of last year. I didn't have the rototiller through the whole season. So, and I haven't tried to turn it on since. We do have some other unique tools on the farm that are unique to us. A wheel hoe that helps us cut a lot of the plant, the old material, the stuff that we can't harvest, that we cut at the root or the base of the plant. We can do that on our beds, and that's something that's a tool, the wheel hoe, that I don't see available here in Japan. Maybe I can share some links with people afterwards. They want to send us a message
That'd be
about where
great.
to get that, because that's been really great too. Um,
Yeah.
it's kind of
Uh,
in our
yeah.
system.
That's great if you can add some links. People can follow up on this and start listening to these great podcasts too.
Yeah, yeah, that's
Dan is asking, how unpredictable have you found the weather in the last couple of years? I know that you were talking about the difficulty of summer, that you really couldn't leave the
mm,
farm because you had to
yeah.
water.
Yeah, I watered yeah, I watered 4 times a day, I think, in August. Getting up at 5, watering at 9, watering at maybe even noon, and then watering one more time around 4 or 5 because it doesn't rain. But I think we have to, you know, place is really important, and understanding the place. I'm not from Mukaishima. I can't say what the weather was 30 years ago or 40 years ago. Um, it changes. Being able to, uh, being able to maybe accept that more, I guess, not worrying, oh, what's going to happen in however many years. I think we just have to, you know, manage that the year by year, because every year just changes. I don't know if, uh, and every year you have really great successes on the crops, and that's where the diversity comes in. I can't say that, you know, it's because of necessarily because of climate change that these things are happening or not, but from when I talk to farmers and I talk to the older people, and that's really important, establish your connections with the older generations that are still doing it in your area. They'll say, "Oh yeah, Mukaishima, it didn't rain in when I was younger in this period, and because of that, this area was famous for salt and famous for drying seaweed." Okay, so and then, well, do you guys still do salt or seaweed? You're like, nope, can't do that anymore. So we have to ask those questions too. It's like how to reestablish some of those niche markets or niche products from this local region that really thrive and are successful in this area. Maybe we think about how to do that again.
And
Hmm.
then also establishing maybe more plants that don't need as much water as we're
Right,
suffering climate change and things are
right.
getting hotter.
Yeah, and we put in a lot of rain catchment places on the farm, either through large tanks. Uh, this past summer, there was this very large concrete tank that hadn't been used and it's a large, swimming pool like tank, and it hadn't been used in years. So we emptied it out, we cleaned it out, and my friend and I cleaned it all out, and we're going to start using that because we know it doesn't rain in this time, and we do need water to establish certain crops, especially in July. A lot of the crops that we get to eat now and in the fall, they're started. The beets are an example. They were started in August when it just didn't rain once. So we're out there, and we have to be flexible, I think.
Dan is asking a great question, which I think we are all wondering is how did you survive COVID? Were you able to sell at the markets or online? Were you able to survive as well?
Yeah, so our markets continued here in Onomichi, thankfully, um, and I never have sold a lot of produce to restaurants in Japan, and there's several reasons I think why that might be, but we were able to sell a lot of our produce to households and to families. I mean, and we'll sell us, if somebody wants to buy our vegetables, within Japan, we'll try and get it to them. So we have customers in Tokyo, not a lot, but we have some. Um, and we're looking at other market streams, but restaurants have never been a big thing for us, so that wasn't an issue. I know a lot of farmers, when I listen to other podcasts in the United States, yeah, they they had all restaurant customers, so they had to quickly switch over to either CSAs or markets. But our market, the Kazoku no Daidokuro, which is a monthly Sunday market in Onomichi, is still going on. We had a big, large organic farmers market meetup in Mihara in Hiroshima this past November. And I hadn't seen so many people gathered together. And I mean, everybody's wearing a mask, or, 95% of people are wearing a mask or a face mask, but it was a really great turnout. And I was really surprised to see so many people turn out. I mean, a little shocked, honestly, but that was one of the best market sales days I've ever had. And people came out to support local and support organic farming. And that, if that were to continue every week or every month, this would be a great option. And we had alcohol available at each booth, I believe, and people were reminded about wearing the mask and the right protocol. So yeah, that's one way we've survived, and just the continued support. I know right around May, when we kind of tried to open up the shop on the side of the farm, we had a lot of people come out just to buy some starter plants from us, and we've been able to retain some of those customers as well. But yeah, maybe the diversity in your sales is really important in this time.
Yeah. I'm showing your blog post right now about the organic market that you're talking about. And you said your lineup was salad kale, red Russian kale, beets, turnips, Asian greens, chili pepper, Swiss chard, and salad, as well as fig jam and dried lemongrass tea.
Yeah.
Well done.
Yeah, we try to keep, and those crops I would say are our main crops, and then we'll do some herbs, and we'll do some herb sets, and tomatoes and eggplants and things like that too through the summertime. But those really are our bread and butter. Like we kind of go back to those crops, and those crops are seeds that I've been saving the last 2 years. So we just have these really strong and well-established crops that they require a lot less effort and a lot less work. And there's stuff that I really like to eat and I like to grow, and I often can't get at the supermarket, so we can establish ourselves as kind of a niche producer in that realm too.
Are customers getting more comfortable with taking a raw vegetable and putting it directly in their bag, or do you still need to package it in plastic? The hurdles of trying to decrease plastic as a farmer is quite hard, right? For growing as well as selling.
Yeah, I think it depends on the crop. I remember a few times I'd go and I'd harvest a big thing of salad mix and I put it in a large bowl, and hoping to sell like by the weight, by pound or by weight. But that really, it didn't really like confuse people. People were kind of reluctant. This was years ago too. And I really wanted to try to establish a way to not, package everything in plastic and have it be fresh. And also by weight too, because you can also reduce the price if it's by weight, because you're reducing your amount of effort to package the plant. But certain crops maybe do better in a bag or in plastic, or it doesn't necessarily have to be plastic, but yeah, it does better in a bag, or it's easier to harvest and wash and pack all in a bag like that. So that there is some convenience factor to the bag for farmers. But certain crops, it looks terrible in a bag, like the kale or the big kale, the Swiss chard. You want those colors to really pop out to the customer and have that marketing appeal. And that's why I would much rather have them out on display like that and be open. And that wasn't an issue. We sold out of the kale and we sold out of Swiss chard at that market. We've sold out of beets and turnips in those particular cases as well. So it's really about your presence at the market too. As a farmer, this is something that I've picked up from a lot of other farmers and attending a lot of markets is just your overall presence and enthusiasm there too, and explaining that maybe, what your value systems are as a farmer, like maybe why we're not using so much plastic or why we don't want to. And we're finding too, a lot of people are refusing bags or not, or already bringing their own bag to the market, which has been really great too. So, particularly at the one local Onamichi market, the one once a month. Yeah.
That's great. We've only got a couple minutes left. I just wanted to mention how you're using renewable energy on your farm as well as composting and compost toilet. Can you just touch on those issues a little bit?
Yeah. So we have, we're not fully off grid. We have solar panels that's what heats our hot water in our shower and our bath area. We're putting in, we haven't connected the other 2 kilowatts of, so it's 8 more panels. We have 8 more panels that we're going to be connecting up soon. And we want to keep that as a regular trend each year, purchasing more panels. We do compost everything that we don't eat. We feed first to the chickens, then we scrape from the chickens. We put that into our compost pile. And then we use one of our friends, when we got married here at the farm, and this was before we lived at the farm, our friend Yaskun, who I can maybe link you guys up with, he sells in these toilet kits, which you use wood chips or any kind of carbon material, and you mix that in, you mix that up, and then we compost it in the backside of the toilet house or the outhouse, and then that goes into another composter, and that sits in that composter for about a year. And that composter is it's a large tub, and that gets really hot, so it kills all the microbes and the bad bacteria that we don't want. And then we use that compost then in either offsite away from our vegetable production, around our fruit trees, or in our trees, like our perennial, like right now we're working on growing eucalyptus. So places where we have eucalyptus growing, we're feeding that compost into there. So that's what we're doing right now with the compost toilet. And that, we're reducing our water cost, also the infrastructure cost to put in a toilet here on our property. We've saved thousands of dollars by doing that. And, we're reducing our waste into a system that would otherwise just go to waste.
Yeah, and you're also using wood burning fire for heating as well, right?
Yeah, well, so a lot of the wood that we're using right now has come from an older couple who they had a huge stock of wood for their bath, and because people were using wood, even 10, 20 years ago, and probably still are in certain parts of Japan, who aren't purchasing gas or electric for their bath. They had a large stock, so they gave us this part of the stock this year, so that's been really great. The ash then goes back into the farm from the wood stove, and then in the top part of our farm, which is land that we're renting right now, that used to be all citrus orchard, and now it's overgrown with weedy trees, and in order to what was once clear-cut forest, I mean, when they established those citrus, they clear-cut all parts of the forest. If you look at older pictures of Mukaishima from 100 years ago, there's no trees at the top of Takamiyama in many places because they used it as either as timber or for fuel. And we're cutting back and trying to create a real living forest instead of what's kind of a dark and dim forest, and then cutting that stuff back. And that waste material either can be established back into the farm or used at home in our wood stove. So we have a small, home that we're trying to heat, and just in these 2 months, that's what we're using. But it's not always easy. But being up there just this past week and cutting the trees, and and this isn't trees that I'm clear cutting and chopping down. This is stuff that's actually fallen down in many cases. It's stuff that's going to die anyway. So we're using it on the farm. But I'm thinking now, what trees can we plant that could be firewood in the future? It's really the more and more I think about some of these ideas of sustainability, well, how is that sustainable, or what can be more, quote unquote, sustainable in the future? What's going to be necessary, and I really want to think about that more and more. And it's hard to get ideas, because some of the people, they don't see that kind of, they don't have that same vision right now. And older generations really had that knowledge of that vision, but it's kind of losing its necessity at this point. So.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for joining today and for telling us all of your insights. Is so useful, and a lot of practical information, I think, for consumers as well, to realize how much effort goes into making organic or pesticide-free vegetables, and how much better it is, of course, for us as the consumer, but also for the area, and the future of farming is really important. So thank you so much for all you do. Thanks, Thomas.
Yeah, thanks for you as well. Like, it's been great to catch up, and great to, listen to the different groups and the different people we've had on and here in Japan and abroad. It's such a valuable resource. So we need more of this and more of these discussions. So
Thank
thanks
you
for
so much.
all of
Yeah.
this.
And it's so great to have you guys collaborate. All the farmers connect with each
Right.
other.
Yeah.
People working at restaurants trying to bake, even people making soap. I would love to see soap makers utilize your herbs.
Right.
Collaboration all over the place. And then in the future, we're thinking about doing a workshop with you and Cowdy about natural dyes as well.
Right.
So hopefully that's on the table sometime
Yeah.
in the next couple months.
Yeah, we really hope to get that going. I think if March is probably looking like a good time, and that, yeah, we can really make some more connections then. So
Great. Wonderful. Thank you, everybody, for joining today. We had some great questions and comments. And tomorrow we're talking with Azby Brown about his organization, which is called Safecast. And they collect data about environmental damage and even radiation around the Tohoku area. So that's going to be a really interesting talk tomorrow at 9 a.m. Please join us again. Thanks, everyone. Have a good day. Thanks, Thomas.
thank you.